let RCTV get going. Thank you for coming to the community meeting. This is a meeting to look at traffic for the new Killam school. I'm sure you all know, that's why you're here. I am Jenny, I'm the architect project manager for the project, and I'm just going to turn it right over to Rebecca Brown of GPI. She's our traffic consultant, and she's put together a detailed and informative presentation for you.
Thank you, Jenny. So we are going to be showing the slides up here. So I don't know if anyone wants to come to the tables a little bit closer just so that you can see a little bit better. I'll give everyone a second to move before I get started, just in case you do want to.
Come sit with you, how's that?
So kind of the things that I want to talk a little bit about, I know we've had previous community meetings to talk about the traffic, but there are a lot of new faces that I don't recognize here tonight, so we want to just give kind of a recap of what we saw for existing conditions at the school when we first did our field visits, and a recap of kind of what we heard from the previous community meetings from all of you on sort of what you would like to see for the new school for improvements. Then we'll talk a little bit of kind of what our goals were as we started to develop the circulation and the access, the parking, the bus configuration, and all of that for the school, and walk you through how that's all going to work, both for the K through 5 and for the pre-K students. For both morning and afternoon. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and go over any questions that you might have. So to begin, kind of the study area that we looked at was kind of two-part on this project. So one was really looking at the on-site stuff on the school itself for how the traffic flows, for how pickup and drop-off occurs, for where the buses wait, and for how the pedestrians and bicyclists who are biking to school actually get access to the doorways. And then the other part of it was looking at what is the impact of the school on the surrounding roadway network? What are the traffic operations at the intersections around the school look like? What's the safety of the surrounding intersections? Are there high crash locations around the school? And then also looking at multimodal mobility. So what are the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations like in the surrounding area of the school as well? And some of the things that we saw in going through doing observations of the morning arrival and afternoon dismissal periods, and looking at the off-peak times too, just to try and understand how traffic flows through the area when school isn't in session. What we saw was a lot of pedestrian safety issues, which are largely related to the number of cars that are parked along the streets, that park right up close to the intersections, sometimes into the intersections themselves. They're on the image that you see on the far right-hand side, that is on Charles Street, where you can see that there's really not a good place for people to park along the street and still leave access for cars to drive through. So the cars are pulling up onto the sidewalk and blocking pedestrian access. When we look over, the picture that's in the middle here is out on Haverhill Street, where you can see that on-street parking there that's right in front of the school, where the crosswalk there is sometimes blocked by the cars that are parking. Cars will queue right up to and through that crosswalk there, making it difficult to see the kids as they're coming in between those parked cars. There's also a lot of weaving movements in and out of those parking spaces as parents are pulling in quickly to drop off their kids and then pulling back out again. And with that being a major throughway, an arterial roadway, that is concerning for the queuing and congestion that it does cause. And then you can see in kind of the two middle images here with the cars parked right up to the intersection. You probably don't even notice that in this left-hand image here, there's a student that's trying to cross the roadway, and you can just barely even see them through the cars that are parked right up to the intersection there, which is a pretty dangerous situation where we've got little ones here that don't come above the hood of most SUVs, so it's difficult to see them. So these were kind of like the big issues that we saw. The other issue that you can see on the image on the right-hand side is that cars are also parked on both sides of the street. And the street is really not wide enough, especially on the side streets like Dana Road and Boswell Road, where it's not wide enough to accommodate parking on both sides. It's barely wide enough to accommodate on the side streets two-way traffic flow. So what we see is that when cars are parked on the side of the road, the cars that want to drive through are kind of competing for space within the through lane, because it's really only leaving one lane of travel left on the roadway, and the two-way traffic is kind of competing for that space. So this is kind of showing what we saw in the morning arrival period as far as the queuing of traffic here. So what you can see with these little blue and green dots that are on this image, those are the cars that were queued up waiting to turn into the school in the morning to drop their students off. So we can see that that queue extends all the way back from the school down to Wakefield Street in the morning. Now, if you can imagine that there's also a number of people who are parking on the side of the street in there that are that are parking and walking their kids in. And now you've got this queued up traffic. There's really no room at all for someone who wants to drive down Charles Street to be able to get through at that time. Similarly, coming in the other direction, you can see that the left turn into the school is backing up all the way to Dana Road, and that's creating some issues with traffic coming out of the school now because the entering queue is blocking the exiting traffic. And then we also see the double parking of cars on Boswell Road, cars parked right up to the intersections there at Dana Road and Boswell Road. This shows you in the afternoon where things get even worse. In terms of queuing, it's a little bit better because in the afternoon, parents all have to park and walk to the school to get their kids. So there's no rolling pickup in the afternoon. So we don't have that long queue of cars that are trying to wait to get into the school. But what we do have is cars parked along both sides of the street all over the place, right up to the intersections, making it very difficult for the kids who are trying to walk back to get to their cars to be able to do so, along with the kids who are trying to walk home to their houses in the neighborhood. So what we're trying to accommodate on the school here, so right now there's roughly 420 students, or at the time last year when we looked at this, the arrival and dismissal patterns, there were 420 students who were enrolled in the school. The future school is intended to accommodate 455 students in grades K through 5. So that's really an increase of about 35 kids. In pre-K though, that's where there's only 30 students that are going to pre-K now. And we're talking about increasing that up to 180 kids. So that's another 150 kids that would be going for pre-K. Now I know that sounds like a really high number to you, particularly as we just talked about all the issues that are happening in the morning and the long queues. But one thing to consider is that the K through 5 and the pre-K do not start at the same time, and they don't dismiss at the same time. So what we're really trying to do is accommodate 2 arrivals and 2 dismissals at different times of the day. So it's not compounded of another 150 or 180 students that we're accommodating. It's really, we're accommodating that 35 additional students in the morning, compared to what we have now. And then we're accommodating sort of a different situation in the afternoon in the pre-K. So one of the things that we looked at was kind of patterns of how people are getting to school today, and to try and figure out how many parents that we need to accommodate picking up and dropping off in the morning. And so what we saw was based on the number of students and the number of students who participate in before school and after school programs. So we took a credit for the kids who are participating daily in before and after school programs. Also the number of students who are bused to and from school. A certain percentage of kids who are walking and biking. to school. The majority of those are walking now. There's very few that are biking, but there are some. So we looked at how many kids are actually walking and biking now, and typical absentee rate as well for the students. And then we came up with a number of students who would be picked up and dropped off daily by their parents. And then not all of these students translates to one vehicle. So there are obviously a number of sibling pairs that are occurring at the school where this is covering grades K through 5 in one pickup and drop-off time period. Based on student enrollment information, it's about 25% that are siblings right now for the K through 5, and about 10% in the preschool population that would be siblings. So we did apply a credit as well. So what we ended up with was approximately 195 vehicles that would be picking up in the morning, or excuse me, dropping off in the morning, and approximately 145 that are picking up in the afternoon for the K through 5. For the pre-K program, it's roughly 80 vehicles that are dropping off in the morning, with 53 that are picking up in the afternoon during the largest pickup time period. So the pre-K has several dismissal periods because they have a morning program, they have an afternoon program, they have an all-day program, and they have a transitional program. And all 4 of those release at different times. So in the largest pickup, we're talking about 53 vehicles that would be coming in. So this is just kind of showing you sort of the summary of all that, how we came up with the vehicles. So for the Killam School, for the K through 5 elementary, we'd be accommodating 195 vehicles in that first arrival window, which is from roughly 8:10 in the morning until 8:25, with school starting at 8:25. Approximately 5 minutes after school starts would begin a 15-minute window for preschool students to arrive. So we would anticipate accommodating 81 preschool parents dropping off in the morning between 8:30 and 8:45. And then in the afternoon, from 11:45 to 12 is when the afternoon program for preschool would drop off. So there would only be 15 students that would be coming in at that time. And we do expect that a limited number of the preschool kids would be bused in. These numbers do take into account, obviously, those things that I mentioned of busing and walking and biking and before and after school programs.
Fridays, it'd be everybody, right? Fridays, are Fridays half days?
Yes.
Is it Friday that's half day?
Yes,
So Fridays would be everybody.
So Fridays, we'd have to figure something out. I don't think we could dismiss at the same time on Fridays.
For pre-K and...
For pre-K, yeah, I can't imagine all of those vehicles at the same time dismissing. That's a really good point.
Okay. Yep, that is a very good point. So we would want to stagger by at least 15 minutes.
So when you talk about
Even on Friday.
siblings being a certain percentage, but all the new pre-K people, the 150 more, those aren't going to be siblings here because they're from all around.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
You're correct. And because they're dropped off at a different time and picked up at a different time, we don't count them as siblings with the existing K through 5 students anyway. And then for the afternoon, the dismissal, as I mentioned, there are several dismissal times that happen. So the first one is the morning pre-K, gets out around 11 o'clock in the morning. There's roughly 15 kids that will be released from that, and those vehicles will all be able to park on the site and pick up their students at the door. And then there's the morning transitional pre-K that gets out at 12:30. And so, again, that will be another 15 kids, roughly one classroom that's being released. And then the pre-K will be released at 2:30, which will be the 53 students that would be picked up in that pre-K dismissal. And then the K through 5 is being dismissed at 2:45, and that's where we'd see that 145 kids being dismissed. So when we met last time for the community meeting, some of the things that we obviously walked through, sort of the existing conditions and what we were seeing out there, to get a better understanding of what really were the goals that the community wanted to have. So obviously, the safety of the pedestrians was a big thing, the safety of the intersections right around the school, the sidewalks with the vehicles parked on it. Those were a big thing that we wanted to address. Improving the access and egress for the school. So obviously, right now, the queues for the access are backing up beyond the egress, and that creates an issue where people can't get out, and then people can't get in because they're blocking. So we wanted to have improved access and egress into the school as well. And then we needed to, yep.
Yes, my question, you're going on to something a little different now than what your original slides were. And I had a lot of questions on some of those, and I think other people may have questions on those, that first set of slides you went through. Is it possible to go back and just quickly go through, and if anybody has questions on any of those original slides?
Like on
Way
the
back to
enrollment
way
numbers?
Way back to the beginning.
Like the existing condition stuff here?
Yes, okay, that's right around, okay. First of all, you need to realize, you haven't told us anything we don't already know about the existing conditions. And when we get a little further down, I have some questions and some concerns, because the numbers now that you're presented are going to get larger. There's going to be more kids coming into the school. You're extending the amount of traffic by bringing in the pre-K. That is extending the amount of traffic that's going to be out there.
It's extending the period that the traffic is there, yeah. Time
I
period.
think that's a concern, and needs to be addressed thoroughly, because there's going to be cars out there a very long time every morning. And you have those parents, they're going to have to find a place to park. And they're going to be parking on Dana Road, and they're going to be parking on Boswell. So that it just extends it. Anybody address this with the, I think the police department has to get involved in this, because crossing guards are going to have to be out there for the preschool as well, and for dismissal. So their time out there is going to be longer also. So those were some of my concerns, and I don't know whether anybody else had some concerns about this part of your presentation.
Yeah, and this part was really meant to highlight the existing issues and the existing concerns that we heard. So kind of this slide that I was actually at was really kind of highlighting the concerns that we heard from the neighborhood on what wanted to be addressed. And the next few slides are kind of how we're going to be addressing that.
Okay.
So I think if we wait so I can show you what is being proposed, and then if you do still have concerns about that, we definitely want to hear from you. So, yeah, so some of the last few issues that we were trying to address were obviously alleviating that off-site queuing that's occurring, particularly in the morning time where we were showing the queues up all the way to Wakefield Street. That's a big thing that really needed to be addressed. We also wanted to address the issue of the parking that is obstructing the through traffic. So in addition to those queues that are obstructing the through traffic, the parking also is, and it's creating a major safety issue for the kids who are walking. And then the last thing that we heard is that we had considered sort of a rolling pickup and a rolling drop-off option to help alleviate some of the parking concerns. And what we heard overwhelmingly from the community is that they really like being able to meet their kids' parents, or meet their kids' friends' parents, by parking and going up to the door, talking to the other parents while they're waiting for their kids to come out, and having that social aspect. So we wanted to find something that is going to address the neighborhood traffic concerns, but also still allow the parents to park and have that socialization with other parents. So this is showing you kind of what is being proposed here and how the traffic flow will work. And I know it's a lot of colors and things, but I will walk you through kind of all of what's happening here. So the school is located over onto the left-hand side, or excuse me, right-hand side of the page. It's left when I'm looking this way. So over to the right-hand side of the page. And Charles Street is off on the left-hand side, Haverhill Street on the right-hand side here. And what we are proposing is to have sort of a loop road that would come in off of Charles Street, somewhat similar to the way you have the loop coming in now, where kids would be dropped off on the passenger side of the car. However, this loop would be much deeper than what you have now, where you can really only accommodate about 8 to 10 vehicles on the site now before it starts backing up onto the roadway. In this case, we would be able to accommodate a much larger number of vehicles on the site, where we would have a loading and unloading area that's shown in that blue color right in front of the school there that would accommodate 8 vehicles just in that area that could be actively loading and unloading at one time. Along the perimeter of this loop, you see kind of that like reddish-orange color. That would be on-site parking that would be located along the perimeter that could be used for people to pull in and park and then walk their kids up to the front door, as well as park in the afternoon within that perimeter. And it can also be used as visitor parking throughout the remainder of the day. So what we would anticipate happening here is that in the morning, vehicles would be coming in through sort of the southerly driveway on Charles Street and queuing up to a rolling drop-off at the front of the building there, where we would be able to have 8 vehicles that are dropping off and then stack another 40 vehicles behind that, or excuse me, stack another 36 vehicles behind that before it would flow back out onto Charles Street. So we would be able to accommodate a large number of vehicles on the site compared to the 8 to 10 that can be accommodated today on the existing site. The other thing that we would have is all of this parking that's located on the site now, where parents are not allowed to park on the site today. They would be able to do that, and we have accommodated 30 parking spaces along the perimeter of that loop road, specifically for parents to use for morning arrival and afternoon dismissal time periods. The buses would have an entirely separate pickup and drop-off area that's highlighted here in yellow, where they would enter in off of Haverhill Street, and they would drop off and pick up along the southerly side of the building, and then they would flow out through that main loop and back out onto Charles Street, joining in with the rest of the exiting traffic at that point. Staff would be able to come in through the access point on Charles Street and immediately take that left-hand turn and enter into the staff parking lot. We have proposed a gate system in that staff parking lot to avoid the situation where parents are kind of pulling in through the staff parking lot and bypassing the queue for the rolling drop-off. With this option, parents will be able to either use the rolling drop-off or park, so it will really be their choice on what they want to do, both in the morning and in the afternoon. And we are also proposing out on Charles Street some improvements as well, where currently people can park on either side of Charles Street, and people are kind of blocking traffic, parking up on sidewalks and everything. So what we have proposed here is to define the parking a little bit more, having a single travel lane in each direction with parking only on the site side of the road, so only on the east side of the roadway along Charles Street. And with that, we're able to accommodate 40 legal parking spaces that don't block anybody's driveways, because I know that's a big issue is that right now the cars park across driveways. So we can get 40 parking spaces that won't block anyone's driveway along the easterly side of Charles Street, between Wakefield Street and Dana Road. And so with that, we'll be able to accommodate 80 parents parking either on the site or immediately contiguous to the site along Charles Street without having to cross the road at all. And without spilling out onto any of the surrounding residential streets as well. And compared to the 0 that can park on the site today, that's a big improvement there. So this is kind of showing you some of the off-site improvements that I mentioned, in addition to kind of how the on-site traffic circulation will work. You can see in the diagram over on the left-hand side of the page, sort of what on the top image, it's showing you the existing roadway, and where you can see sort of the orange parked cars that are half in the sidewalk, half sticking out into the roadway, kind of blocking traffic where, you know, the through cars are having to cross over the center line to get around them. And in the image on the bottom, it's showing you what the proposed condition would look like, where we have, you know, 2 nice clear travel lanes without traffic queued up in them, without vehicles parked in them. And then we've got a clear, safe parking lane immediately next to it, where the vehicles can park fully within the roadway without having to drive up on the sidewalk. And then a nice wide sidewalk immediately adjacent to that, where the existing sidewalk really isn't quite wide enough to meet ADA requirements. And even when cars are parked in the roadway, those vehicles opening their door open out into the sidewalk. So with this parking lane, that wouldn't happen anymore. Along Charles Street itself, at the intersections with Dana Road and Boswell Road, we'd be looking to do some intersection improvements there, where we would be installing new curb radii or curb bump outs, you've probably heard them called, where we basically tighten the radius of the intersection so that it avoids people making those really fast sweeping turns as they're coming through the intersection. It also helps to define the space of where you can and cannot park. So it really clearly defines the end of where parking is allowed. And by installing those bump outs with new crosswalks located at them, it puts the pedestrian a little bit further out into the roadway on a curb, so they're in a safe location where they can be seen around the parked vehicles on the edges of the roadway. With those bump outs, we would also propose that parking be limited to one side on Dana Road and on Boswell Road, and that be signed appropriately. Our recommendation would be that it be allowed on the southerly side of the roadway on both of those roads, so that as vehicles are coming to the school for the morning arrival and afternoon dismissal, they can pull all the way up to Charles Street and then start stacking back from there. So they won't have to make any turning around maneuvers on those streets to get to the available parking. And then once they do collect their children, they will be able to pull out onto Charles Street to turn around and go back into the neighborhood. And then the last thing that is also being proposed is proper school zone signage as you're coming into the area to really help to slow the traffic down and get people to recognize that this is a school zone. It would have the radar feedback indications on those signs so that if you are going too fast, it will start flashing and letting you know, slow down up to a point. So with those improvements, I'm going to kind of walk through what we anticipate seeing in each of the arrival and dismissal time periods for traffic. So kind of, and these are go throughout the day in sort of the order of how they happen. So the first thing that we anticipate happening during the day is the arrival of the K through 5 students at the school. And this is predominantly going to occur with a rolling drop-off like it does today, but parents will have the option of parking and walking their students in if needed. So based on the numbers that we had kind of walked through previously of how many parent vehicles we anticipate coming, we expect that roughly 20% of the parents are still going to probably park and walk their students in, and the remaining 80% is going to be using that rolling drop-off. And with the loading zone that we have, that loading and unloading zone in that blue color right at the front, we anticipate being able to accommodate 8 vehicles in that area, with 22 vehicles stacked in a single line back along that loop road. And then an additional 6 vehicles may queue out during the peak time period out onto Charles Street. Now, when you compare that to what we're seeing now with traffic queued all the way down to Wakefield Street in the morning and all the way down to Dana Road in the other direction, this is a huge, huge improvement over what's happening today out in the area.
I just want to interject that GPI develops this analysis using traffic computer modeling. So
So this is all done using queuing theory models where we input the number of vehicles that are anticipated to come to the school based on sort of the arrival patterns that are happening today, sort of that bell-shaped curve that happens where you start to get a few vehicles trickling in at the beginning of the drop-off period, and then everyone wants to drop off in that last 5 minutes right before school starts, and then it kind of drops off. So this is showing you at the peak of that drop-off time, what do we expect to see as the longest queue that would occur? So this doesn't mean that for the entire hour you're going to have 6 vehicles stuck out on the roadway. It means for a 5-minute period right before school starts, you might see 6 vehicles that are queued out onto the roadway that can't quite fit in. But you can see here that the orange is showing you parked vehicles in the morning, and there are significantly less parked vehicles. What we do also see is that not all of the parking spaces on the site are full. So what may end up happening is that as vehicles start queuing back onto the roadway, cars might just pull into the parking space to let their kid out and then pull back out. So we do actually anticipate that it could be a little bit better than this because traffic can be somewhat self-correcting. But this is sort of showing you that worst case, that last 5 minutes right before school starts, what we anticipate.
You don't anticipate that people will still want to just park on Charles Street to avoid the queue?
We do, yes.
Like,
So what you
along
see,
the-
those orange blocks there, that is vehicles that are parked. So you can see there are vehicles that are parked along Charles Street there. Yep, and then there's also the orange block that's over on Haverhill Street where those 10 parking spaces are located. We do assume that some people will want to park. We assume about 20% are going to be parking and that 80% will prefer to use the rolling drop-off in the morning. And that's consistent with what people are doing now. So they have the option of doing the rolling drop-off now or parking, and that's about the breakdown of what we saw based on the number of vehicles. And then this is showing you sort of the pre-K time period in the morning when we anticipate that 81 vehicles are going to be coming to drop off pre-K students. And this drop-off period will begin at roughly 8:30 and go to 8:45. So there's that 5-minute window between when school will start and people will start trickling in. But again, remember, it doesn't mean that at 8:30 you're going to get 81 vehicles coming in. It means at 8:30 you're going to start to see a couple of vehicles trickling in. And then at that 8:40 to 8:45, that's when you're going to get your big burst of everyone trying to drop off at one time. During that last 5 minutes, this is kind of what we anticipate seeing. So with pre-K students, we expect there's going to be a lot more parents that even though they're going to be allowed to do a rolling drop-off, they're going to want to park and walk their kids in, particularly where there are a number of mobility challenges for some of the preschool students, as well as other developmental disabilities where they may require some extra time to get out of their cars and get into the school. So in this case, we see that we anticipate having about 30 vehicles parked on the site, and that a couple of vehicles may spill out onto Charles Street, but we should be able to accommodate the majority of the parents who want to park on the site itself within that perimeter parking, so that no one really needs to be walking across streets with small children. And then within the rolling drop-off area, Because it is a very small number that we're talking about, we're only anticipating a queue there of 4 vehicles. And so that can all be accommodated on the site itself. So for the morning pre-K, we really don't anticipate that you're going to see much of a difference in terms of parking out on the roadway or traffic spilling out onto the roadway compared to what you're experiencing as you drive through there at 8:40 today. And then this is kind of walking you in the next set of slides through the afternoon pickup. And so we do expect that in the afternoon, based on what we heard from the community, that the majority of the vehicles will be parking for the afternoon pickup. Now, the 4th and 5th graders aren't required to meet their parent at the door like the younger kids are. So there may be some 4th and 5th graders who end up doing more of a rolling pickup in the afternoon. But for the younger kids, they will need to park their vehicle and then walk to get their students. So this is showing you that pre-K time period in the afternoon, that largest dismissal that will happen where we're having 53 vehicles or 53 parents coming to pick up their students in the afternoon. This is going to be occurring from roughly 2:25 to 2:40, so in advance of when the K through 5 is being released. And this is really showing you kind of right before the doors open and things go crazy, what do we anticipate happening? So we anticipate that there's going to be roughly 30 vehicles that are going to be parked on the site within those perimeter parking spaces around that loop, and that another 23 vehicles will spill out to the parking areas on Haverhill Street and Charles Street. Now, as I did mention previously, we are able to accommodate 40 vehicles. Yep, you had a question over there?
Just because I live and I see that we have people right now who park at 210 in front of my house who are here to pick up children from K to 5. So my assumption is that people will still be coming at 210 and that will come even earlier. People may even come earlier than that. So I just feel like I see this piece for the pre-K, but I think we're not considering the actual people who might be here even from K to 5. So I feel like this is probably not accurate of actually who they look like, because I'm sure that parents will be coming earlier than that. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Just something that I've
So,
yeah,
that's a very
it's very nice to
point.
see, but I feel reality will probably be very different.
Yeah, so that is a very valid point. We probably will have more cars that are arriving before that 2:25 time period and they're sitting and waiting. But one of the things that happens when a school doesn't work well with its afternoon dismissal is that parents arrive early because they want to get their kid as soon as they can and get out. And then that's when we start to see things becoming, people arriving earlier and earlier and earlier. The better we can make that first few minutes after kids get out of school operate, the more that time period shrinks down and you don't get a lot of early arrivals because there's no benefit to arriving early other than you just sit there longer. So that's really our goal, is to try and get everyone accommodated in as short a window as possible so that we don't have that extended time period where people are just sitting there waiting for school to be released. And so because we can accommodate so many more vehicles now on the site with having 30 dedicated parent parking spaces on the site itself, we do anticipate that that afternoon time period is going to become a little more crunched where parents don't feel like they need to arrive, an hour even sometimes before school gets out and sit in that first parking space right at the school so they can get their kids in and leave.
Thanks. So to just put some numbers to this, I think that we're proposing 30 on-site parent parking and 80 off-site parking spots. So that's 110, my math's just a number. 110 parking spots for vehicles. And do you know what there is now for parent vehicles, like in the afternoon, which is worth
On the site, there are none.
On-site, 0.
And
off-site, there's probably like 6 legal spots.
legal striped spots, yeah, probably.
There's many more than 6 people that park. There's,
No, there are
What?
many more than 6, are many people parked illegally.
but there's a lot of illegal stuff going on. And no matter how many signs you put up, or flashing signs, or don't park on the side of the street, I mean, it's gonna come down to a matter of enforcement. And the police department does do a daily drive-by, and that's what it is, it's a drive-by. They drive down the street, they make the loop, and sometimes they'll drive into Killam. They never get out of their car.
I,
It's,
yeah, I hear and I see and I feel your pain. So what we're hoping to do is,
That is no different from any other school in the district, right? You could go to Joshua Eaton, and so this plan is up, and hopefully, I'm hopeful because of the amount of parking we have on site, taking it off the street. But how it's executed is the other piece of the puzzle. So it has to be executed well, because those kids have to get in the building so the preschool can come right behind them. But that's no different from any other school. This, to me, just by having those cars being able to be on site is huge.
but you don't think, Carla, that people are gonna still want to avoid, it's a bigger queue now. You don't think that they're not gonna want to avoid the bigger queue?
It matters, I mean, I'm
More
as a mom,
students.
I'm gonna go in and out as fast as I can if I'm driving, right?
But
But I may choose not to go through the queue. Personally, if I think that queue is taking too long, I'm gonna park on the street,
right,
right? But then hopefully other people will go through the queue. But it all matters how fast those kids are being into their cars and through the queue. But at least the majority of these people are off the street right now.
I'd love to see it when this is done. You come back and actually count.
We will absolutely do
Do you
that,
know what I
so.
mean? Like what an actual is.
Yep. Yeah, one of the things that we actually do is, we will, before the school opens, do dry runs with the staff, so that they're aware of how the procedures work. And then we'll be on site for the first week of school to kind of observe, help make adjustments to the pickup and drop off, make sure parents know where they're supposed to go. And it is not, just we're putting what's up there and that's how it's gonna be. We come out afterwards to make sure that everything is working. We just did that down in Swampscott for a 900 student elementary school that just opened up. And they definitely had some hiccups on the first day, for sure. It was about an hour pickup time period. But by the second day, it was 14 minutes. So, we will not just leave you high and dry. We'll come back out and make sure it's working.
I'm sure it's gonna have to be tweaked,
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always little tweaks that need to be made.
but this is, to me, a better situation than what we're dealing with now. But parents have to buy into it. There's a lot of signs that are up, there are a lot of signs out there that are up that, oh, that doesn't apply to me, I don't have to. And just go down Dana Road, one side of Dana Road, it says no parking. Every afternoon, there's cars parked in the no parking area, so I think this might work, but once it gets tweaked, it hopefully will.
Yeah, and enforcement over the first several weeks of school will be huge. It will be very important to make sure that parents know what they're supposed to be doing. And after they get those first few tickets, they start kind of falling in line with what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, one of the goals is to provide a way for parents to be able to drop their kids off safely and legally, right? Right now, there's like no way to pick your kid up in the afternoon and park, there's no legal street parking, so you have to park illegally. So the hope is once there is a legal way, a safe and legal way to do it, with some enforcement, we can encourage people to, take advantage of those legal options.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the problems that you see out there today too are that you have all these conflicting movements of parents parking, moving in and out of parking spaces, trying to get into the queue. Then there's all the kids that are walking across the street. And because so many people are parking down Dana Road and Boswell Road, you have even more pedestrian crossings that you're trying to deal with. With this plan, it gets everybody able to park on the site or on the school side of Charles Street with very little spillover onto the side streets, so that you don't have all those pedestrian crossings that you have to compete with. And there's 2 through lanes of traffic that can actually move through the area.
I would love to see all this for just what we have now. Because all these improvements need to happen for what they have now. So adding in all those new kids and then talking about a 5-minute, 10, 15-minute overall, time frame between pre-K and K-5, you're still gonna have this. And you're gonna have a lot of people competing for the same space. And you're gonna have people flying in from other parts of town because they gotta get their kids to 2 places now, here and here. So I would love all this, but the issues we have right now, I'm not sure if it's gonna be able to handle all the new kids and such a short window of time between one drop off and the next drop off. Must be cleared by 2:40 p.m., I don't know.
So this,
And when we say must be cleared by, it doesn't mean every last vehicle's
No,
gotta
I
be
know,
gone.
but
If a parent is
I understand that.
lingering, it's gonna be
But that's what
okay.
I'm saying, there's gonna be this.
Yes.
so this seems a lot like what we have at Wood End School. Just Wood End seems to be on a kind of a smaller model. It's where I pick up my children. And I know what you said. It does, and it's not really until 2:30 where, it's when you get closer to that 2:45 mark, cars do kind of tend to go back onto the street a little bit. But it does flow pretty well, and I'm just looking at this right now and I'm saying, I really wish I had this over at Wood End. Because the flow pattern on this is much better because Wood End only has one way in and one way out. So it might not be too bad to take a look at Wood End one of these days if you're around the afternoon. I mean, I'm usually there multiple days, sitting in it, and it's not too bad. They have the flow pattern down really well where kids get in and out, and it does flow. And as a parent with 2 children at Wood End, I'm pretty happy with it. So it seems to work. It's not ideal, and I don't think there's not always an ideal situation, but it does flow pretty well, at least on Wood End, and it kind of looks like the same thing on this, just a little bit larger scale here. You go first. Thank you.
Just wanted to make a few comments too. What you've shown here is what you're anticipating as of today, with the numbers for today. I've been a resident of Haverhill Street for approximately 45 years, and it is probably the most dangerous road in town. What I understand the new school to have a capacity of 660 to 725 students. So what we're looking at are today's numbers, but I'm not sure how this is going to play out for the anticipated growth with the school that is being built.
Yeah, so I want to clarify that. So when we say things are based on what's happening today, that's looking at the percentage of kind of who's dropping off and who's picking up. But we are using all future numbers, so future enrollment capacity
So it's up
when
to
we are analyzing.
It's up to 725, then you're.
Yeah, so we've, yes, 635, is that the exact number? Yeah.
I don't know the figures I saw for on the project were 660, 725 is a total.
Yeah, the design enrollment is for 455 kids in K through 5 and 180 pre-K.
So just to go on to with the parking, as somebody else already mentioned, the bike lanes on Haverhill Street are clogged. It's illegal to park in a bike lane. And I can't imagine what is going to happen in the future with the parking on Haverhill Street. As it is now, it's just horrendous between the bikes, the parking, the cement trucks, the 18-wheelers, the letter carrier trucks that are coming from the place in North Reading. It is just one of the most dangerous thoroughfares, and there is absolutely no traffic enforcement. And as I understand it, it is a state road, so very little can be done. There are no lights except for the one at Simon's Way. There's no crosswalk on one side of Haverhill Street, so there's no point in having any crosswalks because there's no sidewalk. In addition, what we're looking at here is something in isolation. In addition to this new Killam school, we also have the church, the hospice house, the daycare facility, a proposed senior center, an ice rink, and brand new pickleball courts. So I think that the parking situation needs to be looked at in a much broader perspective. It can't just be looked at in isolation of one project. Not only that, but we're going to have construction vehicles for the construction of the building.
So we haven't looked at sort of the parking needs of those other uses, but in terms of parking on Haverhill Street, we are showing that the 10 parking spaces that are legal, striped parking spaces right now out on Haverhill Street, will remain. We don't anticipate a high use of those, and the reason is that the way that the school works today is that there are exits all over the building, and the kids come out of every which way. And so right now it's convenient for a lot of parents to park out on Haverhill Street because there are kids coming out the back. So the way the school is going to be oriented is all the kids will come out of one main exit point out through the sort of middle of the building going towards Charles Street. So there's really not a benefit to parents to be parking on Haverhill Street because they're going to have to walk all the way around the school to get to the front of the building to collect their students.
I want to address the parking on Haverhill Street as well. So we've looked at and considered not having that parking. We've considered having that parking. I think for me, the most persuasive was when we spoke with the police. We reviewed this with the police, and their strong opinion was that we provide those parking spaces because they feared that if we don't provide the parking spaces, there's just a shoulder or a bike lane, then people will park in the bike lane. And that's a worse situation than parking in a striped parking spot on Haverhill Street.
I have two questions. So the bus access, are you only letting buses go south on Haverhill Street and take a right in only, or are you allowing them also to take a left in only?
They would be provided with full access, so they can turn left or right.
Are you worried about traffic queuing up, taking a left in? Because there's also that light, and a lot of parents push that light to send their kids to Little Treasures.
Yeah, so actually I'm gonna back up a little bit to that. So there is a crosswalk right now that's kind of like right at the southerly end of the school campus, and because there's no sidewalk on the other side of the street, we are proposing to eliminate that crosswalk there and have the crossing down at where the traffic signal is located, a little bit further to the south where there's actually sidewalk provided on the opposite side of the street in that area. But in terms of having any type of additional traffic control at the intersection itself, we don't anticipate that we would have that. It is, we're talking about 4 buses that are going to be coming in. It's not a large number of buses, and they would be able to turn in pretty quickly and get off of the road. So we don't expect that it's going to create
I was just worried.
the type of
Left-hand
queuing that
turns.
parent traffic does. Yeah.
And then are you still allowing pedestrian access at where the buses enter? Especially for the cars that are parked on there or people that live across the street that do how do we get into the school?
Yeah, if you want to,
Get into
like, point to
that.
where you're referring to,
Yeah, I think she's asking if there will be like a sidewalk that you can walk from Haverhill Street into the school, and the answer is
Oh,
yes,
yes.
absolutely.
yeah, so I didn't actually highlight it, but we are proposing to have sort of a, like, multi-use trail that will go all the way along the southern side of the building, so from Charles Street connecting all the way through to Haverhill Street, so it'll be nice and wide so it could accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians that are walking into the school through there.
Best thing you did is separate the buses from the parents. It's an issue now, and I'm sure you've observed it yourselves, but that's a big, big
So I've been just writing some notes since I've gotten here, and this is fabulous for this presentation, so thank you. I live on Wakefield Street, and I guess to Joanne's point, I'm in between Charles and Haverhill. And growing up, I lived literally next to my elementary school, and I thought it was a state law to have sidewalks within a certain vicinity of a school. Is that still true? Because my dad used to have to make sure the sidewalk was plowed, but I thought it was a Massachusetts, again, I'm maybe asking the wrong people, and I can probably find out
So
myself.
many communities do require that residents, they'll have it in their zoning regulations, that residents clear their sidewalk in front of their house if they are within a certain distance of a school or another public building. But there's no state law that requires that you actually construct a sidewalk there.
So I'm only saying that because, as everybody knows, Wakefield doesn't have sidewalks, and I was just thinking, for safety, it's always a safety reason for sidewalks. I mean, on a busy day for the schools, and regardless of schools in session, with no sidewalks, it's dangerous. And I'm thinking, we're going to a new rubbish system soon. Trash days are terrible for both Charles, Haverhill, Wakefield. I'm just talking the ones that I'm very familiar with. I'm sure Boswell and Dana Road. But the street gets that much more narrow, right? So I think those are things to consider, but I'd love to, and I don't know if it's in your presentation, I would love to see, I know you were talking about the flashing sign, but I'd love to see those signs sooner than later. Why not? There is nothing on Charles Street, north or south, that I'm familiar with. I was actually the one that implemented those bright yellow signs, I think recently. They were at the crosswalk of Charles and Wakefield. I think it makes a little bit of difference. I've almost been hit twice, and I'm really concerned about my husband, who can't move as fast, getting out of the way of traffic. And I'm sorry, that's a personal thing, but at the same time, I think that affects everybody, dog walkers. But it would be nice to see slow down school district, whatever the signs are. But there's not even anything that says intersection ahead. I don't know if you're going to look at four-way stop at Charles and Wakefield.
We absolutely are. In fact, at our first community meeting, my colleague who was with me at that meeting mentioned that she was almost in a crash there.
Yeah.
Because she thought it was a four-way, and it was not a four-way because of the way the striking works, and almost got sideswiped by a car coming through who obviously thought she was supposed to stop there. So yes, we have proposed having a four-way stop, and it's kind of down at the bottom of the page here. Wakefield Street kind of goes off the page, but you can see that it says at the very bottom there, install four-way stop control, and that is at Wakefield Street.
So I mean, you have answered most of my questions. I just didn't know if it was on another side. I think it was answered, is there going to be a right-hand turn only when you get out of the roundabout onto Charles? But there isn't, right? It's going to be, you can take a
Yeah,
left or right.
when you get out of the loop road, you will be able to go either way, left
Either
or
or,
right.
yeah, thanks.
I want to clarify that the off-site improvements are recommendations that we've made, but they're not part of this project. We have shared these with the town, and my understanding is that they're in process, but I'm just not sure what the status is. Do you know anything
They've
from?
made some improvements already on Maple Street. So the fire department has been involved with this, the police department. They have already started to make some of those traffic changes on Maple Street. So the stuff that they can change, they're doing it already because of their work.
What about Charles Street, though? Do you know about Charles, where that four-way?
Charles Wakefield.
Charles Wakefield.
should get those bright signs on that click and fix it website. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, we can report back.
Yeah,
on-
I mean,
on the
they were
status of those
present for
items.
all of that
And-
stuff, so.
And some of these items, I mean, the stop sign is not a big expense, but some of these items, obviously, like the improvements on Charles Street are, more of a capital investment, so I think there's like a planning process to get them into the kind of pipeline.
Yeah, and there's a number of different funding mechanisms that can be used to get those in place as well.
If I just pulled up the slides from the AM arrival too, for those who haven't been up time, I appreciate some of you being here tonight and sharing your perspectives too. I just want to share echo a couple of points I've heard already too. Just, I think I'm encouraged to see so many on-site parking spots and also options for parking spots compared to what we have now. I would say I think this represents a much safer sort of option in terms of parking availability compared to what we have now, especially given the concerns you outlined. And also the queuing system, which is a much better system, I think a structure that's much more conducive to a better queuing system than what we have now. And I would argue, looking at this is probably the best structure that we'll have out of all of our district schools in terms of parking availability and queuing system to enable us to try to do what you outlined is a good path. I would also just emphasize too, so much as the kind of the behavior you've all put on, you expressed matters just as much as the structure that you have. I'm fortunate to probably be able to see over 50 schools a year arrival and dismissals. And I would say that there's a lot that have very little to work with that can get families in and out pretty quickly, and that is about reinforcing behavior and rules and expectations. So I think there's definitely a lot of work that we would have to do there. But there's no reason to think that we shouldn't be able to get families in and out pretty quick, given all of this parking and that pretty sizable queuing system. I would say, or also on the 5-minute thing, 5 minutes doesn't sound like a lot when you're thinking about like a pre-K and then a K. But actually, in conversation with a lot of districts who do have a K and a K to 5 and a pre-K in the same building, which is common, that 5-minute buffer is actually a pretty wide gap, I feel like, in school time. If you're here on a at a time and you're looking at 8:30 versus 8:35, things look significantly different. So at first, I was hesitant to think about 5 minutes. That's not enough. I was pushing for 20 at first. But as I've talked to districts that in schools that do this, and I've seen them for kind of with my own eyes, that 5 minutes does represent a pretty significant amount of time. Now, the concerns you've all outlined in terms of just lingering traffic, I hear you, and I think that's something we have to look at. But that 5 minutes is a lot longer than I thought it would be in terms of impact of clearing people out, especially on the AM transition.
Yeah, and I want to clarify something about the 5 minutes. So the arrival times or the start times of the schools are actually separated by 20 minutes. The 5 minutes we were talking about is we expect it will take about 15 minutes of heavy traffic in the morning, heavy traffic in the afternoon, that 15 minutes right before the school starts of heavy traffic. And then there's sort of a 5-minute window when nothing's really happening because everybody's at the school. And then there's a 15-minute period where all the pre-K students come in. In the afternoon, you're going to have sort of a 15 minutes of chaos when the pre-K kids get out. We expect everyone to be clear after about 15 minutes, and then there will be a 5-minute buffer window in case somebody is lagging behind before the remaining kids for the K through 5 are actually released from the school. So it's a 20-minute separation between the drop-off the start and end times of the school days.
And therefore, I would say, without Lindsay here as the principal, if we're not able to clear out pretty quickly, I would say that's more on us as a sort of operational piece than necessarily is the structure here. But.
I'm just aware that I think you have one more slide that you haven't shared, a very important slide, and I'm going to get to it.
Yes. So I think this is the one that probably everyone is most concerned about, too, is that when the school is released for all the K through 5 students, what is that going to look like? So this is really, school getting out in the afternoon, where we've got 145 parents trying to pick up their kids. What does that look like? So as I mentioned before, we can accommodate 30 of those 145 parents on the site, in the parked spaces, or in the parking spaces on the site. We can also accommodate another 40 of those vehicles along sort of the site side of Charles Street there. So we've got all of that traffic that's now happening kind of on the site side that doesn't have to cross the road, that's really cutting down the number of pedestrian crossings that we anticipate. There are still going to be, in the afternoon, some parking that will occur back onto Dana Road and onto Boswell Road as well. But what you saw previously in the afternoon was cars parked on both sides of all of these streets throughout about the same area. With what we're proposing, we'll be able to accommodate that same amount of traffic, having parking on only one side of the streets, and the area where people will park will not extend back any further than where it is today. So we're actually able to condense down the area a little bit of where people are parking and get everyone parking on one side of the street. We do anticipate that there will be a little bit of rolling pickup that will occur for the 4th and 5th graders, where the parents may just kind of pull up along the side of Charles Street or pull into that loop with a loading and unloading area at the front of the building. We assumed here as a worst case scenario, about 50% of the 4th and 5th grade parents will want to do that. Obviously, some of them will have younger siblings. Those people will have to park because they have to meet their students at the front door for the younger siblings. But we have assumed that some will do that, and we can accommodate that entire queue on the site as well, within that loading area of 8 vehicles, with potentially up to 16 vehicles based on that 50% doing it queued up behind the loading area on the site.
Is Charles Street wide enough right now for the parking lane as well as 2 lanes of traffic?
Yes, it is. So we would not have to widen out Charles Street at all, so this would happen all within the existing sort of curb to curb width. Yep.
Not to put you on the spot, Mr. Superintendent, what we're looking at is a finished product. This project is going to be going on for what, 2 years? Has any thought been put into how we're going to deal with construction vehicles, in and out all day long? I feel bad for poor Lindsay because she's got a tough road to hoe. But safety for the kids is number one most important thing that we do. And has there been any talk about how you're going to deal with parents, construction vehicles, before school and at the end of the school day? And I think, I'll be honest, it's building a school when the school is already in session, that's tough. All that noise in the classrooms and everything, not much you can do about it, but I'm just curious how we're going to accommodate construction vehicles and the kids while this is going on.
I can take that if you don't mind. So, absolutely great question, very legitimate concern. So what we have made a plan for that, and during construction, the existing school operations will continue as they are today on the west side of the site, the left-hand side of the site. There will be a construction fence down along about where the field begins right now, a little bit closer to the school than that. And that side of the site will be devoted to construction. Construction vehicles will enter and exit from Haverhill Street. There won't be any paired parking on Haverhill Street during construction. And the arrival and departure and parking will continue as it is right now. Does that make sense?
Will there be able to recess?
Yes, we will relocate a playground to the, there's like a disused courtyard right now that's on the north side of the site. So the playground will be relocated there. It's going to be less space. It's not going to be ideal, but that's where they will have recess.
You can kind of see the outline here. sorry, you can kind of see the outline here of the existing school building, so that courtyard area is right here.
This is why we have an owner's project manager. We have an owner's project manager specifically for the reason you're talking about. Construction sequencing, how to keep the kids safe and build the school while they're in school. We are in November at our meeting, we are deciding what our HVAC system is going to look like. We will be having most likely geothermal wells. Those need to be done. So we have a small space, and that construction sequencing is going to be important. Where do the teachers park? Where are the laydown areas for the contractor? Where do the construction vehicles park? That's all part of the construction sequencing.
Just to clarify, construction vehicles will only be entering and exiting on the Haverhill Street side.
I can't do that. You may not even know things like that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there's no reason they can't.
And Carl, the other thing I'll add about the other year I'm worried about too is on the back end, once the building is, the construction's complete, and there's still, the old building here as well. So that's, obviously with our OPM have to, work through that year, which we know, perhaps might be even the most challenging year as well too. But I appreciate those sentiments, and those are things that are on my mind. And again, our OPM I think has been on top of sort of these details thus far, because they are challenges not only in terms of logistics, but in terms of student learning, recess, all those pieces too. So thank you for raising them.
And our designer and our OPM, they have significant experience with the MSBA process. So this isn't their first rodeo. It may be ours, but it's not theirs.
This maybe is a question posed to Karen, being here from the town. But again, this is being looked at in isolation. The traffic study and the whole safety issue. Along with the construction of the Killam School, there will be the construction of the community center on Simon's Way. There'll also be the construction of the pickleball courts. So to look at just one project in isolation, I think we really should be doing a traffic study and a safety analysis of the entire area, not just one.
You're absolutely correct. If I go back to kind of that first slide. There we go. The diagram over on the right-hand side shows you the area that we're looking at as part of a traffic impact and access study, where we are looking at the safety. So we're studying collision patterns of all of the blue dots that you see here, all those study area intersections. We're looking at the traffic operations there in terms of, how much time are people spending waiting at each intersection, how long are the queues there. We're looking at the pedestrian accommodations at each of those locations. And as part of that, we're projecting all of the traffic to a future year condition, which includes a 7-year growth period from when the school is opening. And as part of that projection, we include all the known other developments that are going on in the community as well. So talking about the community center, the skating rink, we're adding traffic associated with all of those projects when we do the traffic study.
So that has included the community center and the pickleball courts, the increase in traffic in the Haverhill Street area.
Correct, yep. Any
But it's
project
not
that
just for
the
the school.
town knew about at the time that we contacted them over the summer, we have accounted for
Including
the
all the
traffic.
additional construction vehicles all colluding it.
Well, we do look at the period after everything is done construction, so what will be the typical traffic going forward from there. But certainly as we go through the planning process of this project, we'll be looking at sort of,
Center for Active Living comes on board, they will have traffic studies done as well, and they will be able to utilize our existing work to add to that as well. Because they've been on board for a year now, and the senior center wasn't even on part of that thought process at that point. So they've done a majority of their work. So once the senior center comes on board, you'll have traffic studies done there as well.
But that's what I think they all should be done at the same time. You know, the entire thing, the entire area should be analyzed.
Yeah, so our study area will include this whole area that you see showing up on the diagram here, so. Nope, Simon's Way is in there. You can actually see Simon's Way kind of right in the middle of the page along Haverhill Street at the top there.
The increase in traffic in that area is the issue.
Yeah, and we will look at the increase in the traffic. And we just haven't, submitted the traffic study yet. But we've done analysis of the entire area and crash patterns along all those roadways.
Because the MSBA is only going to participate in funding for our traffic study. They're not going to pay for another need in the town. So, and every construction project has a traffic study typically, so we'll be able to share ours with whatever traffic study is done.
I can confirm that they were made aware of the potential for Simon's Way, I think it was last summer, and we're very grateful that we brought it up to them. But I could also envision potentially, just hired the owner's project manager for that project. So I don't know if we could leverage your engineering skills for that project as well, or at the very least coordinate between the two teams.
Thank you so much for all the listening you've done and all the incorporating of the feedback. I just had a question. Are there any conversations going on with the Christ Arcade congregation and church in terms of the change in parking patterns? Because parents also tend to pull into that parking lot, and then they come out, and then there's going to be the construction site. So will there be a safe route for families that do park over there when the toughest parking times are happening?
Sure, so are you talking about during the construction period, or are you talking about once all the construction is done, would parents be able to continue parking there?
Yes, and I also just wanted to say, give a note of hope. We used to have 555 students in this building, and so this is not a new issue on the challenges, so I'm really glad that you're trying to grapple with these ahead of time. Thank you.
So to the extent possible, we're trying to get parents to be able to park on the school grounds or immediately adjacent to it without having to rely on private parking that may or may not be allowed necessarily. But we are providing, obviously, the multi-use path that I talked about that will run along the southerly side of the building. I know that there is sort of the informal goat path that goes through the woods there over to the church. I imagine that some people will continue using that. But with what we're proposing, it will be much easier for parents to just park on the site or along Charles Street and not have to make use of other private parking in the area.
It is what it is.
It's
It's going to happen.
Yeah, we're not going to say it won't happen, but we're trying to discourage it by making it easier to do other things.
Hi, this is great. I'm standing up just so I can see you. I sense that you're sold. I don't know the word. My son goes to Rise at the high school. We do a rolling drop off. It's great. There we did I'm sure you've talked to Alana, who's the interim director. They did a survey on the parents. It was like 70% wanted to do rolling drop off. 21, well that doesn't do math, but it was a majority of everyone wanted to do it. I went to pick up my son today. I was 5 minutes early. I was the first one there. So like when you say 5 minutes, it actually is really long. If you want to go with me to pick up one day, just to see.
Right next door.
Okay. I know, but it's so different. And I think that was something like the infrastructure versus behavior. You can't change the behavior right now because the infrastructure just doesn't exist. and I understand, I mean, I literally just like avoid, it's hard, and I understand that you're frustrated, and I am too, and I live over there. But when the infrastructure is right, like the first day we did drop off, it took 6 minutes in the line, and now it's like, 6 minutes was like long, and now it's like 3 minutes. And so it works, it takes a little bit, you know, we have to get the infrastructure correct. This is your job, like bless you for doing this and thinking about it and overanalyzing it, but we can't change this behavior until the infrastructure's there. And also, a bunch of elementary school kids with construction equipment out like all day, it's gonna be their dream come true, so I'm sure they're gonna be excited about looking at that. So I just wanted to say, it's hard to imagine this working when you're not living it, and I live it every day. So genuinely, come to the high school and check it out, just it's quick. So I'm not, that's all I know as a mom, so Godspeed.
Any other comments, questions, concerns?
Thank you, very good presentation.
All right, thank you all very much.
It's never gonna be perfect.
No, I didn't know,